Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Paodcast, presented by the Daily Pao.
This is Pranati,
Amit,
and Purva.
And we're from thedailypao.com, a city-specific food and culture website, and this is our weekly podcast, the Paodcast. Now, in this episode of the podcast, we're going to be talking about railway stations, 2 old ones and 1 new one, and this is part of our segment called Metro Station, in which we showcase city history and news. So stay tuned for Metro Station.
Metro Station.
So, 2 old stations might be demolished, or at least parts of them might be demolished to make way for the 5th and 6th lines between CST and Kurla on the Central Railway. One of these is Sandhurst Road and the other is Byculla, but it's not entirely clear whether all of Byculla will go or whether a part of it will go and some of it will be remodeled. So the news stories haven't clearly said what's going to happen there. But Sandhurst has to be moved to make way for these 2 new lines, which will be used by long-distance trains.
Okay. But Byculla station, I mean, it's pretty historic, right? I mean, it's one of the biggest railway stations.
It's one of the biggest. It's also quite pretty. I mean, Byculla station, if you've been there, it's obscured by, like hoardings. It's obscured by a lot of new ugly architecture, but the old station itself, it's quite nice. It's got these nice stone arches and it's got these solid iron pillars inside and iron arches as well. I mean, these form the superstructure inside the station and some pretty lattice work as well. So it's a very nice looking station, and you're right, it is historic because it was one of the stops on the first railway route between Bori Bandar, which is what VT used to be and which is now called CST, and Thane. This was in 1853, so it was one of the stops. The station wasn't built then, but it was on the way. And the station itself came up in 1891. And according to Rajendra Aklekar, who's a journalist, and he's also a train enthusiast, and he's written about the history of the railways, the Bombay's railways. This was the first passenger steam locomotives were tested here before trains began to run in 1853. So there's a lot of history attached to Byculla station, and it'll be kind of sad if it has to go.
It's surprising that it's such an iconic station has been chosen to be demolished for this project, but I'm guessing it's because of where it's situated, right? It's right in between.
And also the problem with Bombay is that there's just no space. And even though the railways own a ton of land in the city, there's no space to expand, so I guess they have to do away with this station.
But what does this mean for the commuters? Does this expand their travel time as a result of this?
Well, this will help long-distance commuters. So mail train commuters, they'll get 2 extra lines between CST and Kurla, so I suppose that will mean, 1 more station that you can alight from. Like right now there's Lokmanya Tilak Terminus, and there's Bombay Central, Bandra and VT. But, maybe this means another place they can get onto trains from. So it'll help long distance commuters.
And what about people it's on the central line, right?
Right.
So what happens to those people?
I suppose there'll be some teething issues when the station is being demolished or remodeled or whatever's going to happen to it.
Okay.
But so far, I don't think they set a deadline for it yet. So
and Sandhurst Road actually is a station many people may not be familiar with. I mean, to where exactly is it, and like what's happening with it?
Sandhurst Road is on the harbour line.
I'm asking for the benefit of our listeners.
Okay, so Sandhurst Road is on the harbour line. It's the 3rd station after CST. So it's again a very historic area. It's a small station. It's not the best, cleanest, not in the best neighborhood. It was named after a former governor of Bombay, Lord Sandhurst. But that area itself is pretty historic. When I was researching Sandhurst Road, I looked up the book that I go to for any local history story, and that is Sharda Dwivedi and Rahul Mehrotra's Bombay, the Cities Within. And I was reading about the area and how in the late 19th century, the city was completely remodeled by the Bombay Improvement Trust, and this was a precursor to the BMC. And what they did was they created what they called sort of ventilation pathways, because Bombay was very congested. It was unrecognizable. And so they created a series of causeways and arterial roads that connected various parts of the city. Princess Street, for example. Sandhurst Road is another one that connected Umar Khadi in the east to Hughes Road. In the west. Hughes Road itself was one of these arterial roads that was built. So before Sandhurst Road, which is now called, VP Road, before that was built, that whole area was just a warren of very congested streets where apparently people would fear to go. And so then they just removed all of that, remodeled it with this one arterial road, Sandhurst Road. So it's an interesting piece of history that I came across while looking up the station. Yeah.
Cool. And for the record, I did take the harbour line quite frequently when I used to work in VT.
Do you just remember that?
Which is about 17 years ago, but...
Yeah. So this station, they're saying, will be... the new Sandhurst Road station will be built on P. de Mello Road. This is apparently the plan. And this is also quite an old station. Not as old as Byculla, of course, but it was built in 1921.
So they're going to rebuild it, as in...
Yeah, so they're going to build another station because they have to.
Yeah.
But P. de Mello Road, which is not far away.
Not far away from VT.
So while these two stations are probably going to go in some part, there's a new station.
Yes.
Which you've done some research on.
Well, the extent of research that I've done is that I've spoken to somebody who lives right outside of the station. But the new station in question is Ram Mandir railway station, which was up until quite recently was going to be called Oshiwara station.
Which would have been a better name.
But of course, the current government, I suppose it was just very convenient of them to call this Ram Mandir.
I didn't even know there was a Ram Mandir
So
there.
basically, it is. I mean, because this is between Jogeshwari and Goregaon, maybe you guys were not aware, but there is an area of the city called Ram Mandir, because named after, the temple over there. And the main road over there is also known as Ram Mandir Road. And the station is right there. But basically the station has been talks about building the station going on for like over a decade, and it's been under construction for 9 years. It was finally completed and open in December. And the whole reason why the station was built was because residents of the area were hankering for it, because it takes very long to get to Oshiwara. Now, this being the Oshiwara, the area between Jogeshwari and Goregaon, not Oshiwara and Andheri, which is kind of confusing for people because there's also an Oshiwara in Andheri. So basically this is... people who used to work in Goregaon and Jogeshwari used to find it very difficult to sort of commute to this area, and basically to take a rickshaw was quite expensive, and so they decided to finally build this station. It was opened in the third weekend of December, and it was built at a cost of 32 crores. It has 4 platforms. This is the trivia I'm giving you.
You're giving us the checklist.
Yes, but trivia about the station that it's apparently the only station between Churchgate and Borivali that was built after independence. And it is the 37th railway station between Churchgate and Dahanu. So for pub quiz aficionados, these are things that you can remember. And it's the first station since Koppar on the Central Railway line, which was completed in 2007. Now, coming to the name. Of course, the name, like I said, refers to this landmark in the area. But of course, the Shiv Sena and the BJP have sort of there have been accusations that they have sort of called for the renaming of the station because, to get political mileage out of it. They, of course, are saying that not to be, there's nothing communal about it because we have a station called Masjid as well in the city. So,
yeah, but what they probably don't know themselves is that masjid doesn't refer to a mosque. It refers to the 2 synagogues in that area.
So there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
But of course, it seems that when the day that the station was inaugurated, when the first sort of train stopped there, these party members were greeting people with Jai Shri Ram.
Oh my God.
So
Amazing.
But it's also kind of hilarious that apparently now both of them have been fighting, both the parties have been fighting to come up for credit to who came up with the idea to rename it Ram Mandir from Oshiwara. And at the inauguration, while both members of these parties, both of them were sloganeering, and so while the BJP member was speaking, they were shouting Modi, Modi. When the Shiv Sena person was talking, they were like Bala Sahib. So
Sounds like you were there.
well, I know somebody who was almost there. He's a film producer called Samir Gauri, who actually lives right outside the station, and he was telling me that he could every day before the station was inaugurated, was almost complete. He could hear these goons from both these parties sort of fighting with each other, fight about who came up with the name first. And he was also saying that it's sort of it's a kind of unusual place, because when he takes a cab sometimes and he tells people to take him to Jogeshwari, they tell him, "Arey, this is Goregaon." And when he tells them it's Goregaon, they say, "No, you got us to Jogeshwari." So Ram Mandir is actually how it's known. So, it's really, that is the name of the area. So they are kind of justified. But of course, like I said, it's not that, we'll be fools to believe that there was no communal angle behind, this effort to rename it.
Naturally.
Also, the fact that they plan to rename Elphinstone Road Prabha Devi now. There's also plans to make that. So this is how it is. But what he was also saying was that he doesn't see the station, it's not very crowded. So it's not sure how many people are actually using it. It's great for somebody like him who lives right outside the station, but and for people who sort of work and live in the immediate vicinity. But by and large, there were already complaints when it was finally built, that a lot of buses don't ply into the area. He was saying that while it's not really close to the main road, it's off SV Road, but it's quite a drive inside. It takes about 5-10 minutes to drive in there, where Jogeshwari station, for example, is right off the main road. So you can, you get down and the station's right there. So it's not sure how much of a difference this is going to make to the city at large.
Well, I think it'll take some time, right? Because people already have said Jogeshwari and Goregaon as places to alight and board trains. So I think it's just a matter of time when people sort of make a difference.
In the years to come, if it so turns out that this was completely useless, then the BJP and Sena won't really be sloganeering anymore.
Well, the other thing about it is that no fast trains or even semi-fast trains halt here. And semi-fast trains, as people who take trains might know, as trains that, for example, that from Churchki to Andheri, they are fast until Andheri, and then between Andheri and Borivali, they are slow and they halt at every station. But these semi-fast trains, which will halt at all the other stations like Goregaon and Jogeshwari, will not halt at Ram Mandir, because it will just screw up the timings for all the trains. So they've said that they have no plans to make it a station that will that fast trains or semi-fast trains will stop at. So that is another sort of disadvantage, I suppose, about this place. But Harbour Line trains, I think, will soon halt at it, because they are building one of the platforms, I think, is for Harbour Line.
Right, they are planning to extend it.
So so maybe then it will increase. But it's interesting that we've got a new railway station after so many years.
Yeah. That was a long profile of Ram Mandir, Amit. Very impressive. So that's it for stations this episode. We've told you about 2 old ones and 1 new one. So that's it for this episode of the Paodcast, and we'll be back next week. For more on what's happening in this city, read thedailypao.com. Also subscribe to our newsletter on the website. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We're The Daily Pao. And you can find this podcast on the Indus Vox Media SoundCloud page, as well as iTunes, Stitcher and TuneIn.
If you like listening to the podcast, check out Geek Fruit. Hosted by Uber geeks Tejas Menon and Jishnu Guha, this show talks about geek culture from an Indian perspective. Star Wars, comic books, science fiction and fantasy, TV shows and more.
Hey man, just help me out, man. I need some podcast, man. I haven't had a fix in a week. Just need some.
Don't you worry about it. I got podcast galore for you, man. Just go to ivmpodcast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thanks, man. I'm gonna check it out.